Let's build a responsive web application with Flutter and StreamChat. For this, we upgrade our chat application, which works on iOS and Android, and make it also available for the web. We will look in detail about how we can add multiple users to our chat application, how we can add the responsive touch to our web application, and lastly, we will also implement the story view within our mobile application. If you are new here, subscribe to my channel and make sure to watch this video till the end. Let's get started by adding multiple users to our chat application, and therefore we want to use Google Sign In to sign in our user and also to sign it out later. And therefore our client authenticates itself with the Firebase server over Google Sign In, and then it returns here this ID client. And after that we have logged into Google, then we want to create our own server, and we also need to authenticate with our own server. And we need our own server because our own server needs to communicate with the StreamChat server. And this server is then responsible for creating a token, and from this token we get then this user token back, which we give then back to the client. And we want to get started now with the Google Sign In. Therefore we can navigate from our home page to this profile page, and here we can log out our user, and then we also have a button with which we can log in again to Google. Therefore we want to get started and remove here our home page by this Google Sign In page. So by default, if we open our app, we will go first of all here, and after we sign in, we go to our home page. Within our main file, we go then to our material app, and here we have the home property, and this is currently pointing to our home page. However, we want to replace it by our auth page. And now we want to create this auth page, and here inside we basically want to create our sign in button, and therefore I create here this new method which returns then an outline button. And here inside you put then first of all a label inside, and this label basically says sign in with Google. And secondly, we also put the Google icon inside, and therefore I use here this font awesome icons, and here you can then access the Google icon. And to make use of this font awesome icons, you need to go to your pub/spec YAML file, and here you need to add this dependency under your dependencies inside. Now we have here our Google Sign In button, and we also want to give it some style to make it a little bit better. So we make it rounded, give it some padding, and also give it a color of black. Next, we want to implement the functionality. If we click here on this button, then we want to sign in with Google. And therefore I go here to the class Firebase Google API, and here inside I create then an instance of our Google Sign object. And to make use of it, you need to go to your pub/spec YAML file, and here you need to add this Google Sign In under your dependencies inside. After this, we create this method login, and here we basically call then this Google Sign object, and here you have this method sign in. And if you execute this method, then this dialog will pop up, and here you can basically choose your Google account. And after the user has then signed in, we get then the Google user here back. And we also want to make sure that our user is not null, and therefore we throw here an exception. However, if we have a user, then we want to call here the authentication. And with this Google Auth, we can then here basically supply the access token and the ID token to create our credentials. And then we need to call here this Firebase method to sign in with our credentials, and then we put here our credentials inside. And this method basically returns then our user credentials, and with this we have then access to our user data who has logged in with sign in with Google. And from our login method we want to return a boolean, and here we basically want to return true if the user was a new user. However, if the user was already logged into our application, then we return here false. And therefore you simply access here your user credentials, and here you have some additional user info. And here we get then access if the user was new created to our system or if he was already existing. And all in all, we have created right now the sign-in functionality for Google. And we also want to create a Google Sign-in provider. So I create here this Google Sign-in provider class, and here inside we create also a method which is called login, and here we basically call then exactly the method login which we have created before. And after our Google Sign-in, we can then access our current user, and this user has then all the information like the name, the email, and so on of this user account. And we also want to wrap here around a try and catch block to catch all the errors. And now that we have logged into Google, we also want to log into the StreamChat API. And therefore we check here if we have a new user created, then we also need to create a new user in our StreamChat. And therefore I call here the Stream User API, which we have created in the videos before. And here basically we have this create user method where we then put an ID inside, a username, and this image of the user. And this method basically calls then the Stream API and creates this user. And back in our Google sign-in provider, we need to supply then all this data. So first of all, the ID user. And basically from our Google sign-in provider, we got this ID back, which was used to identify the user in Firebase. And we want to use the same ID for the client also for authenticating our user with the StreamChat API. And therefore I simply put here this user Firebase UID inside, which is our ID. And now we create here a user on the StreamChat server with the same ID which also Firebase has. And next we also set here the username, and therefore we simply take here the user Firebase display name. And this is basically then this name which you see here at the top if the user has logged into Google. And this is what we get then over this parameter. And secondly, we also want to add here our URL image, and we also can access then this user Firebase photo URL, and this is then also the URL of our Google image. And this was now everything about creating a new user. However, if the user is already existing, then we only want to log into our StreamChat API. And therefore we call here the StreamChat user API, and then we call this login method. And this is also what we have created already before. And here we only need to put then the ID of this user inside which we want to log in. And with these statements, we basically logged into the StreamChat API. And right now we have used here this dev token. However, this is not working for real world application. And therefore we will later create our own token with this user ID. However, now let's go back to our Google sign-in provider, and here we put then also our user Firebase UID inside like what we did before. And now we can go back to this method login, and we also want to change here this implementation. So all in all, we have now signed in with Google and we got this ID client back, and then we also signed into the StreamChat API. However, now we also want to create here this step where we create our own server and then we authenticate to our own server. And this user token we can then later use to log in here to our application, because we need here every time a token. And this is what we want to replace with our new token, which we are generating with our own server. To generate our user token, I'm right now here within the documentation of the StreamChat. And here you can basically choose then the implementation of your server in different languages. And in my case, I want to develop the server with JavaScript and Dart, and therefore I take here this code. And this code you paste then in your server inside. So in my case, I use here Firebase functions. And after this, you also need to set here your API key and your API secret up. And therefore you go to the dashboard of the StreamChat website. And here I go to my production app. And then I scroll all the way down, and here you see then this key and secret. And the secret should only be used for the server. It should never be visible to the client. And now you basically copy both of them, the key and the secret, and you paste it here inside, the key and also the secret. And now with this method create token, we create then the token for this ID user, which we have got from the user authentication. And now we are here within the step of create token, and we got then this ID client from our own server, which is right now here exactly this implementation here. And our own server got then the ID client from the client itself. And after we have then called this create token method, we get then a user token back. And this is basically this token which we return here. And this token we will send then again back to the client. I will also quickly show you more of the implementation of the Firebase server. So basically I have implemented here Firebase with Dart and JavaScript. And here we have a function which is called create token, and this is later called by the client itself. And from the client we get then some authentication request. And here we basically have right now only the ID user inside. And this is basically the client ID which the user got from Firebase. And now we can basically get from this request data our ID user, and with this ID user we want to generate then our token, and therefore we call here this method generate token, and here we put then this ID user inside. And this method then will basically call exactly here this code, this generate token method. And here we get then the token which was generated back. And at the end, we want to send this token back to the user. Therefore, I create here a new user token object. And here inside, I put then the token and also the user ID inside. And after this, we create here a response where we put our user token inside and we send then this whole object back to our client. And therefore, I simply call here this method send response and put here the response back, which is then received by the client itself. And if you want to learn more about how to create Firebase functions and how to create a server with Firebase, then I will put a link inside of the description where you can learn more about Firebase setup and setting here everything correctly up with Start and JavaScript. And by the way, you can also get here this whole source code with the first link in the description. And with the second link, you can get access to my Flutter courses where I teach you how you can become a more efficient and better developer. Our client side needs to call this create token method right now from our Firebase server. And therefore I go to the class StreamUser which we have created in the last tutorials. And here we basically have the method to create our user account within our StreamChat API and also this method to log in. And in both of these cases, we used here right now this dev token, and also in the login we use this dev token, which we want to replace right now. And therefore I create here this new method generate user token, and this is basically calling then this create token endpoint which we have created before with Firebase, or you can also create this endpoint with any other server language which you like. And this method gets us then a user token object back. And here we get then access to this token which we can use instead of the development token. And now we need to call this generate user token within our login method and replace here this statement. And therefore I call here this generate user token method, and here we put then the user ID inside, and we get then here this user token object back. And here we need to put then our user token inside, and therefore you call here user token.token, and this is then the token which we need to log in our user. And the same thing we also do here for our create user method. Here we also replace our dev token method, and we put here this generate user token inside, and we get here again this user token. And then we also replace here our last token with this user token.token. And with this, we have finished here the implementation of calling Google Sign-In, our own server, and also creating a token. Now we want to continue, and we want to call this login method every time if we click here on the sign-in with Google button. And therefore we simply go to our main file, and here within the main function we have already implemented every time the login before we start our app. However, this time we want to do it differently, so we want to call the login method every time if we click on this button. First of all, we go to the main file, my app class, and here we have basically our material app. And around everything we want to wrap here our multi-provider, and here we want to initialize our Google Sign-In provider, which we have created before and which has then this method of logging our user in. And to use this multi-provider, you need to go to your pubspec YAML file, and here you need to add this provider under your dependencies inside. Next, we also want to change our navigation, and therefore I create here a global key, which is our navigator state, and we put it here inside of our material app. And later we can then reference over this navigator key our routes. And we also want to switch to named routes, and therefore I create here this code. And I will also link a tutorial about this in the description of this video. And to use named routes, we also need to replace our home route with some initial route and onGenerate route. And our initial route stays then the same, so it is still this auth route which we had before. And this is then displaying here our auth page which we had before in our home attribute. So in total everything stayed the same, only that we changed our routing system. And we changed here our navigation to use here now this navigator key, and then we can navigate to our home page or also to our auth page. And this is exactly what we want to do in our Google Sign-In provider. So I implement here the constructor, and within the constructor I create this listen status method. And here inside you can basically listen to the status of the StreamChat API. And this has then the connection status, which means if we have later logged into StreamChat, then it returns that we are connected. And if we log out again, then we are unconnected. And we can now basically listen on this connection state. And then we can basically get here every time the connection status value, which is our current connection state. And based on the status, we want to navigate to our pages. So let's say we have connected our app. So if we have logged in our app, then we want to navigate to the home page. And therefore we simply call here this navigator. And this is then referencing here our navigator key, which we have initialized before. And back in our Google sign-in provider, the navigator is then pushing a new named route. And here we push our homepage route. And this happens every time if we connect to our app, then we want to go to the home page. And if we disconnect our app, then we want to go back to our auth page. And therefore we call here again the navigator.push and push here to our auth page. And next to it, I also will add here some other cases, but this is not really important right now. And the advantage of this listener is that it every time now listens to the changes of our connection state. And every time if we later call here this create user method, or if we call the login, then he is going automatically to the homepage because we have defined it here inside. And also if we later log out our application, so if we call later a method StreamUserAPI logout, then he is also going here inside and is logging our application out. And lastly, we also want to implement here the functionality on our auth page, which is here this page on the right side. And here inside, we want to implement then the functionality if we click on this button. And therefore, we simply get here the provider. And here I put then the Google sign-in provider inside, which we have implemented before. And here we basically have then this method login. And this is basically logging then our application in over Google API and then later over the StreamChat API. And therefore, I simply call here within this button provider.login. To test this functionality out, we also want to go again to our main file. And here within our main method, we had this login statement inside. And this is what we want to comment out because now we want to do it over this button. And before we can actually click on this button, we need to do one step more. And this is we need to go to Firebase. And here you need to go to the Authentications tab. And then I click on Get Started. And here you need to go to the sign-in method Google and you have to enable it, otherwise we cannot log in. And then you can click here on Save. You also need to go to your project settings. And here if you scroll all the way down, you also need to add here under your Android app also these SHA certificates. And therefore I go to this question mark and then you can open this page. And here if you scroll a bit down, then you should see this comment here. And basically you can choose here Windows if you have a Windows computer. And if you have Mac Linux, then take this one. So I will copy here this comment. And then you need to go to your console and you need to type here this comment. And as the password, you write here in lowercase Android. And now we have here the SHA-1 and SHA-256 keys. And what you do now is to copy first of all the SHA-1 key. And then you go back to your Firebase project and click on Add Fingerprint. And you add here the SHA-1 key and click on Save. Then you go back to your terminal and here you also have the SHA-256 key, which you also need to copy. And then you go again to your Firebase project and here you also add the SHA-256 and then you click on Save. And with these SHA values, we make sure that we can also connect to our Google sign-in server, otherwise it doesn't work. And now we can try it out. So I click here on the sign in with Google button. And then we have created here a new account, which is connected with Firebase and also with the StreamChat server. Now it's time also to run our Flutter project as a web application. Before we can do this, we need to do some configuration about StreamChat and also about the Google sign-in. And therefore you need to go to this web folder in your Flutter project. And then you go to your index file and here you scroll all the way down. And before our last script, we want to add here another script inside. And this script is needed to run StreamChat and Flutter as a web application. And now we also need to add the script inside of our web folder. And therefore I simply drag here two files inside of the web folder and you basically can get them with the first link in the description where you get then the source code of this application. Now we also need to configure Firebase for the web because we use here Google Sign In, and also we'll upload a file to Firebase. And therefore I go again to console Firebase google.com, and here I scroll down and then I add here this app and I select here the web application. Here inside you type web and then you click on register app. And then you need to copy here the script with your Firebase configuration. And we paste it then inside at the beginning of our body tag of our index.html file. And this will make sure that we initialize Firebase also as a web application. And lastly, you also need to add here these two scripts. And the first one is about Firebase app, which is the core dependency which you need to add. And then you also need to add this Firebase auth, which is responsible for the Google sign-in. And at the very end, we also need to add something for Google sign-in. Therefore, we go here up to the header, and here we want to add a meta name, and therefore you need to add this Google sign-in client ID. And here within the content, you need to add then your ID, and therefore I go to the Android folder here inside of the app, and here we have added before this Google services JSON, and here inside you scroll all the way down and then you copy here this client ID. So make sure that you copy here this content. After this we go again back to our index.html file, and here within the content we paste our ID inside. And before you can run your application in the web, you also need to go again to your body tag, and here you need to add another script. And this is this Firebase Firestore script. And after this, you need to go to your terminal, and here you go to the Flutter project location of this Flutter project. And then you run this command Flutter run. And here we specify the browser Chrome. And what is really important is also to set the web port to 5000. And this is the default port which is supported by Firebase and Google Sign-in. And if you don't run it with 5000, the Google Sign-in wouldn't work. And then you press enter, and then you should see that the web application started, and you can click on the sign in with Google button, and here you can then authenticate over Google, and then you sign in with Google, and it should redirect you to our chat application homepage. Next, we want to make our web application responsive, and therefore we want to display here on the left side all of our chats, and here on the right side the individual chats with different people, and we can also write here our messages. To accomplish this responsive design, we create here a new homepage widget, and here we return in our build method then the homepage mobile page, which is exactly this page which you see here on the right side. And secondly, we wrap here around a responsive builder. So we can access here the sizing info, and here we can basically check if we are currently within a desktop environment, and then we want to display here another homepage desktop. And this is what we want to create. And otherwise, if we are not in a desktop environment, then we show here our mobile homepage. And inside of this homepage desktop, we want to display on the left side all of our chats. And then later we can click here on one of these individual chats, and then we select here a chat, and then we basically can chat with this person. Therefore I go to the homepage desktop widget, and here I create then the chats, and this is then displayed later on the left side. And therefore we create here a method build chats, and here we return a widget which we have already created, where we display then all of our chats. And this is exactly the widget which we had here already in our mobile page, so we make use of the same widget. However, we also want to change a bit, so on top of this widget, which we had also in our mobile page, we want to place here this app bar. And therefore I go here back and I wrap here our chats in a column, and on top of our chats we want to display then this app bar, and here we put then our user image inside. And this user image is then displayed here on the left side, and we also want to create here two buttons. And therefore I go here inside and create here first of all only one button. And now we have already created here this left part of our application, and this looks then like this. So we have here this app bar, and also here later are displayed our channels. On the right side we want to display then every time the chat which we have selected, and then we can type here all the messages. And therefore I go again to my scaffold, and here next to the chats we want to display then first of all a divider, and next to the divider we want to show then an individual chat which we want to create right now. And to display our individual chat, we also need a channel, and therefore I go here to the build method and I first of all get a channel provider, which we want to create later, and here we can later access the field selected channel. Let's now create a channel provider, and here inside we basically create then a field for the selected channel, and we also set here a getter and also a setter to set again a new channel. And we use the channel provider to later select here our chat, and if our channel is then selected, then we can display here our channel on the right side. Therefore, let's go back to the homepage desktop widget, and here we want to give this chat which we create more size, and therefore I put here a flex value of 3 inside. And with this flex value of 3, this widget is 3 times bigger than the other widget because this expanded widget has a flex value of 1. And this results then later in that our chat is displayed here with 75% in width, and the other are only displayed with 25% because here we have only this normal expanded widget. And now we want to create here our build chat method. And here we basically return the chat page mobile which we have created before, and here we can then put our channel inside which we have selected. And this will then display here this channel page which we have created already before. And to finish our design, one thing is missed, and this is this text here, select a chat. So in case we haven't selected here a channel, then we need to select a channel first. And therefore I go here inside of the method build chat. And if we haven't selected here a channel, then we simply display here text select channel and we also center it. Otherwise, if we have selected a channel, then we display this channel. And now our channel looks like this, so we can here basically select a channel and then it should select here the channel on the right side. And to do this, we also need to go to our channel list view. And within our channel list widget, we had here this method which we implemented in the last videos, build channel. And this is then basically displaying here one of these channel. And if we click on this channel, then we want to select our current channel. And this is what we implement then within the on tab handler. And what we did in the mobile version is to always go to the chat page mobile. However, on the desktop version, we want to display it here on the right side. And therefore I distinguish here between the mobile and the desktop version. And we make here use of this method get device type, and then we can check if we are currently within the mobile version or if we are within the desktop version. And secondly, we also want to access here our channel provider, and this has then the state of our current selected channel. And at the very end, we simply check here if we are within the mobile version, then we use here the navigation what we did before. However, if we are here within the desktop version, then we set here our new channel which we have selected. And now if we click here on one of these channels, then it is selected here on the right side. And we also can type here our messages and send it to our chat. And at the very end, we also want to integrate stories to our application so that the user can upload images, and then it is later displayed here in our application. And therefore we want to continue where we left last time in the last video, and here we have only this card, and if we click on this, then we want to upload our story. Therefore I create here a new class StreamStory and here we basically want to add a story, and therefore I create here the story object where we put then an image inside of the story which should be uploaded, and we also put here a datetime object inside. And the most important thing is that we also put here a from JSON and to JSON method inside so that we can later store our story as a JSON format. And secondly, we put here this image file inside, and this is later the image which we select from our camera, and we have it then in our file system, and this is what is going here later inside. And now what we want to do is we want to upload this file here to Firebase, and then later also add our story to this StreamChat API. First of all, we want to get here our current user, and therefore we go over our Stream API client, and then you can here access the state and also the user. And this has then all the information of our user, like the name and so on. And like you remember, you can always go to your StreamChat dashboard, and here you can go to the Explorer section. And then you click here on users, and here you basically get then all the user data which this user has. And here we basically uploaded before an image. And now we also want to add some stories in our JSON format. And therefore we simply convert here our user to JSON so that we can access this JSON format. And here we want to add our stories too. But first of all, we need to upload our image file to Firebase. And therefore we first of all generate an ID for our story. Secondly, we upload our image to Firebase, and this is a method which we have created before, and this is basically uploading our image file to Firebase. And we can supply here a path to where it should be stored, and then we also set here the file which should be uploaded. And this is what we want to do right now. So we supply here first of all a path, and we want to have for each individual user a story. And therefore we first of all go here over this user ID, and then later we put here the story inside of the user directory. And lastly, we simply refer here this file which should be uploaded. And now we want to save this URL image within our story object, and therefore I use here this copy method, and then I put this image URL here inside. Now that we have here our new story, we also want to add it to our user. And therefore we want to add it here to all the data which we have within our user. And here we want to add an attribute which is called stories. And there we want to add a list of all the stories which this user here has. And therefore I look here up if we have currently some stories within our user. And on top of this current stories, we want to add then our new story. And therefore I simply call here this add new story to JSON, and then we have here our new stories. And then we want to add here our new stories to our user, and therefore I take here this user JSON and put here all the stories again inside. And lastly, we get here this new user JSON data, which has then here this modified data with our stories object inside. And therefore we convert our new user JSON again to a user object. And this is basically the user object of the StreamChat API. And this new user we want to set then in our StreamChat API. And therefore I call here this client again, and then I call update user. And here inside I put simply the new user inside. And with this functionality, we basically add now a stories field within our JSON file. And then we add here our current story, the image, and also the date inside. And next to adding a story, we also need to load all the stories of the other users, and this is what we want to do in another method. And here I basically call then this method get stories. And with StreamChat, it's basically really simple. You have here the Stream API client, and then you call query users. And we want to get here specific users, so we want to make sure that we are communicated lastly with this user. And then we get here all the users back with which we communicated lastly. And then we want to convert it here to some stories, and I don't want to go here into detail about it, but basically we are accessing here the stories attribute which we have inserted before, and then we are converting it to this user object which has then all the stories and also the username and also his profile image. And now we return here a list of stories, and this contains then all the stories for each individual user which we have communicated with. And here next to it, we have then the username and his profile image. And now it's pretty simple. So if we click here on this add story widget, then we want to go to the camera view. We want to pick an image. And after we have picked an image, then we have here this button where we can add it to the story. And we start here by going to the add story card widget, which is here this widget at the right side. And if we click on this widget, then we want to navigate to a camera page. And I make here use of this Camera Awesome plugin, and this basically gives us then this complex view where you can basically choose your image and everything out of the box, so I don't want to go into this here. However, after we have chosen then our image, we come to this view where we see our image again, and then we can click here on Add to Story. And therefore I have created here this new page, photo preview page. And here we basically have this button add to story. And if we click on this button, then we call this upload story method, which we want to implement right now. And here what we do, we show some circular progress indicator so that we wait until the story is uploaded. And then we want to upload our story. And therefore I call here the stream story API add story. And here we put then basically this image file inside, which we want to upload to Firebase. And later it's then uploaded to the StreamChat API. And after we have uploaded our story, we simply navigate here to the people page, which is here this page where we are currently inside. And after we have added our story, then we want to display all of our stories, and this is also pretty simple. And therefore I simply go to the stories grid widget, which we have implemented in the last video. And here around our grid view builder, which is right now displaying only here this one card, we also want to wrap here a future builder. And then we want to call here the stream story API to get all the stories. and this is basically the method which we have implemented before to get us all the stories. And now we simply want to display here all the stories which we get. Therefore, I simply go to this grid view builder, which is displaying here this grid view. And for the first index, we are currently displaying here this add story card widget. And now we also want to display here all the other user cards. And every time we access here then the individual story and add it here to our user story card widget, which we want to create right now. And within our user story card widget, we get then here this user story widget with all the stories of an individual user. And we also get his username and his user avatar. And this is what we want to display then in a story. So we have here this image and then also the user information at the top. Before we do this, we also want to build here our user story card. And like you can see, we have here an image, a username, and also an avatar. And this is what we have implemented already in the last tutorial, where we have created the story card widget. And now we need to supply here only the title, this image, the background image, and also the avatar, which is then displayed here on the left corner. And we also can implement then this on clicked handler. So if we click later on this card, then we can do some functionality. And therefore I simply call here the story card widget, and I put here first of all the title inside, which is then the username. We also put here this image inside, which we get out of our stories, and we access here the first story, and then we display the image of the first story. And we also put here the image of our user image inside. And then we also want to implement the onClicked handler. So if we click here on one of these cards, then we want to open up the story view. And therefore I basically call here a navigator, and I push to a new page, which is called story view page. And here we put then all the stories inside, which are then displayed. And to display here all the stories, I will not go into detail about it because I have already created another video tutorial about it, and I will link this video in the description of this video here. And now our app should work, so you can upload an image and then you can send it to the story, and then it will be added to the story. And here you can also see it on the right side. I have added an image of the emulator, and then it is also displaying here the story if we click on it. Within the chat's homepage, I have also implemented here this top bar so that we display here all the users. And this is what you find here with the first link in the description. Then you can check out also this example. And lastly, we want to log out our application, and therefore we want to click here on this icon on the left side, our user image, and then we come to this profile page. And here we have then this logout button to log out from StreamChat and also from Firebase and Google. To implement this functionality, I go to the home page, and here we want to go to this leading property of our app bar. And here within the leading property, we have this user image widget. And this is then displaying the user image in our circle avatar. And now if we click on this image, then we want to navigate to this other page, to our profile page, where we can then log out again. And therefore I simply navigate here to this profile page. And this is the page which we want to create right now. And I don't want to go into detail about this page because basically we are only displaying here this user image, and this is then displayed here in a circle avatar. And next to it we have here this logout button, and this is the main functionality. And we want to implement this logout button. So basically we call here our provider, our Google sign-in provider, and then we want to add here a method logout. Therefore we go to our Google sign-in provider. And here we add then this logout method, and here I want to call then the stream user API, and here we want to also create this logout method. So let's also go to the stream user API and let's create this method. And here inside we first of all need to log out from Firebase, and therefore you call here Firebase auth, and here you have the method sign out. And secondly, we want to log out from StreamChat API, and therefore you have here this method disconnect, and here inside of it you can also supply clear user so that the user is cleared and that it is not anymore in the cache. And this is really important to add it to have a real logout. And therefore we also want to create this logout method within our Firebase Google API. And within this method we basically check if we are currently logged into Google, and if this is the case, then we also want to sign out from Google. And all in all, we are now done here with the chat page. We also have implemented the stories, and now we can also log out our application, and we can click here on log out. And then we come here back to our auth page and we also can sign in again with another user. Hello everyone, thank you so much for watching this video. Please make sure to give it a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel here to get the latest news about Flutter, and see you soon. Bye!